Ryo Voss had a simple philosophy: never trust a glowing corridor. He'd been spirited through enough of them to know their sole purpose was to lead you somewhere you definitely didn't want to be. Today, that somewhere was an alien arena where uniformity and sanity were banned at the door. "Welcome to the Galactic Zoo," a voice droned overhead, slick with the slickness of too much experience telling people they were about to die for someone else's entertainment. "Please survive, at least until the second act." Ryo blinked, the harsh glow of artificial daylight blaring down on him. He turned to Ira Quill, who looked like she was one snarky comment away from unraveling the universe with sheer force of will. Her eyes were narrowed, calculating, already 3 steps ahead of their captors. "Welcome my ass," she muttered, more to herself than to him. The arena's walls were a hodgepodge of alien architecture, like a drunk architect had been given free rein with a 3D printer and a stash of narcotics. Ryo squinted at their so-called enclosure, which they shared with a smattering of other species, all looking equally puzzled and pissed off. "I'm guessing we ain't here for the buffet," Ryo grunted, sidestepping a particularly aggressive slug-like creature oozing its way towards a cluster of terrified spectators. Ira gave him a look that could curdle milk. "Not unless you fancy being the main course." A buzzer sounded, the universal symbol for things are about to get a whole lot worse. On cue, a set of massive doors lumbered open, revealing a menagerie of mechanical horrors. Ryo felt his stomach flip. "They really went all out, huh?" he said. "Like Jurassic Park meets Robot Wars had an illicit love child and this is its birthday party." "More like it's blood sport," Ira corrected, her voice a tight coil of tension and grim humor. The first act began with a roar that could have been the sound of a dying god or just a very pissed-off emu on steroids. Either way, it didn't bode well. A monstrous creature barreled into the arena, its scales shimmering like sequins at a nightclub for nihilists. "So," Ryo said, eyeing the creature with a mixture of dread and admiration, "do we try diplomacy or just stick with running like hell?" Ira snorted. "I've seen your diplomacy. It involves more flailing than a drowning squid." The creature lunged, massive jaws snapping shut inches from Ryo's face. He rolled to the side, adrenaline his only ally. "Guess we're running then," he shouted, already sprinting. The crowd roared, a cacophony of alien languages and bloodlust. Ryo could practically taste their hunger for violence, a bitter tang in the back of his throat. "This is insane," he panted, dodging a swipe from a clawed appendage that could have bisected a starship. "Who the hell thought this was a good idea? Someone with a lot of free time and a severe lack of hobbies," Ira shot back, somehow keeping pace despite the chaos. They ducked behind a barrier that seemed deliberately flimsy, as if the architects had a thing for irony. Ryo peeked over the edge. "Ideas." Ira was already scanning the arena, her mind a whirl of possibilities. "We need to turn the audience," she said. "Make them see us as more than entertainment." Ryo raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose we do that? Stand-up comedy, interpretative dance, something like that," Ira replied, her gaze fixed on a control panel across the arena. "Think you can distract that thing?" "Easy," Ryo lied, knowing full well it was anything but. "I'll just tell it a few jokes." "Good," Ira said. "Make 'em laugh until they cry." "Or you do." With that, she took off, sprinting across the battlefield with a grace that belied the danger. Ryo inhaled sharply, then leapt from behind the barrier, waving his arms like a madman. "Hey, ugly," he shouted at the beast, which turned its attention to him with the lazy curiosity of a cat considering its next meal. "Do they sell your kind in pet stores, or are you just special order?" the creature roared, charging at him with a speed that was deeply unfair for something its size. Ryo sprinted, zigzagging through the arena, praying his legs wouldn't betray him. Ira reached the panel, her fingers flying over the controls. "Just a little more," she muttered, her mind a focused laser. "Any time now, Ira," Ryo yelled, hearing the beast's breath disturbingly close behind him. "Got it," Ira shouted, slamming her fist down on a button with a triumphant grin. The arena lit up with a blinding flash, the air heavy with static. Ryo skidded to a halt, watching as the creature halted mid-charge, its eyes wide with confusion. In the stands, the audience leaned forward, their interest piqued. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ira's voice boomed through the arena, broadcast over the speakers with a confident flair. "I give you the wonders of human ingenuity." Ryo glanced around, noticing that the chaos had stilled, every eye fixed on them. "Great," he muttered, trying to catch his breath. "Now what?" Ira winked at him from across the arena. "Now we survive." As if on cue, a second wave of creatures poured into the arena, each more bizarre and deadly than the last. Ryo felt his heart sink. "Well, shit," he said, already preparing to run. Round 2. The creatures charged, an amalgamation of teeth, claws, and tentacles. Ryo threw himself into the fray, dodging and weaving with a mix of desperation and determination. The crowd gasped, the pandemonium rising to a fever pitch. Amidst the chaos, Ira's voice cut through like a blade. "Remember, it's a show," she called, her tone sharp and edged with humor. "So smile for the cameras." Ryo barked a laugh even as he ducked under a swinging limb. "Smile, I'm too busy trying not to get eaten." They fought, side by side, their movements a dance of survival against the odds. Ryo's fists connected with hide and carapace, a percussive symphony of defiance. Ira was a blur of motion, her strikes precise and lethal. As the battle raged on, Ryo found himself grinning despite everything. This was madness, pure and unadulterated, but it was also life at its most exhilarating. "They don't make reality TV like this anymore," he quipped, ducking another attack. Ira snorted, her laughter bright even in the midst of chaos. "Reality's overrated," she said, delivering a final, devastating blow that sent their opponent sprawling. The arena erupted in applause, a tide of sound that washed over them with approval. Ryo staggered, catching his breath, his body aching but alive. "Well," Ira said, brushing herself off with a casual ease that spoke volumes of her confidence. "I think we just became the most popular act in the galaxy." Ryo glanced at the cheering crowd, then back at her. "Let's hope they don't demand an encore," he said, his voice a blend of relief and lingering dread. As the arena's gates began to close, a sense of foreboding settled over them, hinting at trials yet to come. But for now, they had survived, and in this hellish place, that was victory enough. "So," Ira said as they made their way back to the holding area, "what's next on the agenda?" Ryo shrugged, his trademark grin resurfacing. "We improvise," he said with a wink. "It seems to be working so far." She laughed, a sound full of warmth and defiance, and together they stepped into the uncertain future, ready to face whatever madness awaited them next. Ryo Voss leaned against the wall of their cell, which seemed to have been designed by someone who thought comfort was a four-letter word. The walls hummed with energy, a reminder of the arena's sharp teeth lurking just beneath the surface. He scanned the room, noting the other unfortunate souls trapped with them, some with more limbs than seemed practical, others with none at all. Ira Quill sat cross-legged in the corner, her eyes closed, probably wishing she was anywhere else. "Nice digs, huh?" Ryo said, his voice echoing slightly. "I've seen better hospitality in a leper colony." Ira cracked an eye open. "And less chance of getting devoured by something with more teeth than sense. Speaking of which," Ryo said, nodding towards the shimmering force field that separated them from freedom. "Any idea how we don't end up as the universe's next viral blooper reel?" Ira smirked, a glint of wickedness in her eyes. "From what I've gathered, we're supposed to entertain. Keep the audience on the edge of their seats or wherever they park their alien behinds. That's the key. Spectacular. We're the main attraction in a circus where the animals bite back," Ryo groused. "Any intel on the competition?" "Yeah," Ira replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "A delightful mix of homicidal robots, carnivorous flora, and sentient blobs, all with a healthy disdain for personal space." Ryo sighed. "So more of those than allies, then." "Exactly," Ira said, her voice as dry as a desert. "Turns out watching us tear each other apart is the main event. A commotion from a neighboring cell caught their attention. Some unfortunate species, a cross between a porcupine and an endocrine system gone berserk, was attempting a breakout. Its spines crackled with electricity as it hurled itself against the force field, which responded with a flash and a sound like a small child being told to clean their room. Ryo winced. That's gonna leave a mark, and not just on the porcupine, Ira added, watching the creature convulse on the floor, thoroughly fried. Lesson learned, Ryo noted. High-tech barriers, 1. Outraged escape attempts, 0. The door to their cell slid open, and a guard with the charm of a tax audit entered. It, or possibly he or she, not that it mattered, wore a uniform that screamed "I hate my job" in 17 languages. It gestured for them to follow. "Guess it's showtime," Ryo said, pushing off the wall. Ira gave him a derisive salute. "Let's hope we're more entertaining than the porcupine." They were led into a corridor that, surprise, surprise, glowed ominously. Ryo's philosophy on glowing corridors flashed through his mind, though he didn't need reminding. Nothing good ever came from following these paths, unless your idea of a good time involved screaming. "This place is a real gem," Ryo muttered as they walked. "Someone should write a travel guide." Ira snickered. Chapter 1. How to avoid becoming a splatter on the arena floor. As they emerged into the arena again, the crowd's excitement buzzed through the air like a caffeine overdose. Whoever was running this zoo clearly had a thing for spectacle, or sadism, or both. "Remember," Ira whispered, "we need to work the crowd." "Sure, I'll just break into a tap dance number," Ryo replied. "You got any show tunes?" The arena announcer's voice boomed, slick with enthusiasm. "Welcome back, esteemed spectators. Our next act features the curious species known as humans. Will they thrive or merely survive? Place your bets." Ryo glanced at Ira. "No pressure, right? Pressure makes diamonds," she replied, a wicked glint in her eyes. "Or it crushes you to paste." "Let's shoot for diamonds then," Ryo said, shaking out his limbs like he was about to run a marathon. Which, given the circumstances, wasn't far from the truth. The gates across the arena creaked open, revealing their opponents. Ryo squinted, trying to make sense of the writhing mass of metal and muscle. It looked like someone had welded together the nightmares of several species and called it art. "Great," he muttered. "They've sent us a Picasso of pain." Ira's eyes narrowed, assessing their situation with the precision of a scalpel. "We need to think like them, unhinged and out for blood." Ryo quipped. "Exactly," she said, her voice steady. "They want a show. Let's give them one." The monstrosity lunged, its multiple limbs flailing with enthusiasm. Ryo dodged, the wind of its passage ruffling his hair in a way that was definitely not romantic. "You know, this is exactly how I pictured dying," he shouted over his shoulder. "Terrifying beast, screaming crowd." Just missing a cocktail, Ira was already in motion, her intent clear. She darted towards the creature, drawing its attention with feigned vulnerability. "Hey, ugly," she shouted, waving her arms. Over here, Ryo watched as the creature turned, its gaze locking onto Ira like a predator on easy prey. "You sure about this?" he called, skeptical of her strategy. "Trust me," Ira replied, that wicked grin still in place. With a burst of speed, she led the creature on a merry chase around the arena. Ryo took the opportunity to scan for weaknesses, anything that might give them an edge. He noticed a small, blinking panel on the beast's back, a control interface perhaps. Of course they'd give it a "do not press" button, Ryo muttered, making his way towards the creature. "How considerate." As Ira looped around, she flashed him a look, time to act. Ryo charged, adrenaline fueling his reckless sprint. He leapt onto the creature's back, clinging for dear life as it bucked and roared. "I feel like a rodeo clown," he yelled, fumbling for the panel as the beast tried to dislodge him with all the grace of a malfunctioning blender. "Just open it," Ira shouted, weaving through the chaos below. Ryo managed to pry the panel open, revealing a circuit board that seemed to be held together by hope and questionable engineering. "All right, beastie, let's see what makes you tick." With a deftness born from years of tinkering with salvaged tech, Ryo began rerouting wires, his fingers dancing over the controls. The creature convulsed, its thrashing growing more erratic. "Any luck?" Ira called, still evading the flailing limbs. Ryo grinned despite the circumstances. "Let's just say if this works, drinks are on me." He connected the final wire and the creature froze, its movements halting like a paused video. The crowd erupted into cheers, their bloodlust momentarily sated. Sliding off the creature's back, Ryo landed beside Ira, who looked at him with something approaching admiration. "Not bad for a rodeo clown, thanks," Ryo said, catching his breath. "Now what? We turn this into a strategy," Ira replied, her mind already spinning webs of plans. "Use their technology against them. Make them regret ever underestimating us." As they exited the arena, the crowd's applause still ringing in their ears, Ryo couldn't help but chuckle. "I think we just earned ourselves an encore," Ira smirked. "Let's make sure it's one they'll never forget." Back in their cell, the excitement of victory still thrummed through Ryo's veins. "So, what next?" he asked, leaning against the wall. Ira considered, her gaze thoughtful. "We find allies. Turn this zoo into a coalition. If we can show the others there's a way out, maybe we won't be the only ones surviving the next act." "Great," Ryo said, his grin returning. "Diplomacy with creatures that have less social skills than a rock." "Hey, even rocks have feelings," Ira countered, her tone teasing. "But seriously, we need to convince them. Unity is our only shot." "Then let's start a revolution," Ryo said, feeling the weight of their task settle on his shoulders. "What's the worst that could happen? They eat us," Ira suggested, raising an eyebrow. Ryo shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first time." As they settled in for whatever passed as rest, the reality of their situation loomed large. Yet, amidst the madness, there was a glimmer of hope, a chance to turn the tables, to become more than just another spectacle in the Galactic Zoo. They might have been thrown into the deepest end of the universe's insanity, but as long as they had each other, they had a fighting chance. "Sleep well," Ira said, lying down on the hard surface that pretended to be a bed. Ryo chuckled softly. "Sure thing. When I wake up, I'll expect breakfast in bed." "Don't hold your breath," Ira replied, her voice tinged with laughter. And in the silence that followed, as the lights of their cell dimmed, they knew their battle had only just begun. The cell door slid open, and Ryo was unsurprisingly not greeted by breakfast in bed. Instead, a new, unwelcome face peered in, a creature with enough appendages to make a squid feel inadequate. Its skin appeared to be a mosaic of scales and feathers, colors clashing like a toddler let loose with a paint set. "Ah, new friends," Ira said, giving a derisive little wave. "More like new problems," Ryo replied, eyeing the creature with suspicion. The alien rasped something that sounded like a blender choking on a fork. Ryo, who'd long since given up trying to find a universal translator that worked, turned to Ira. "Think it wants to eat us. Could be asking where we keep the sugar," she suggested with a smirk. The alien made more noises, gesturing emphatically. This time it thrust something towards them, a small, holographic device flickering with symbols that might have been language, or a very abstract form of art. Ryo squinted at it, trying to make sense of the pulsating nonsense. "Looks like their version of a greeting card. Happy Death Day," Ira guessed, leaning in to get a better look. Finally, the creature managed a guttural sound resembling words. "Zin Argal welcomes you." Ah, formalities. Ryo couldn't resist the sarcasm. Always a pleasure to be welcomed into a hellhole. The alien didn't flinch, perhaps unfamiliar with irony. "Zin Argal, leader of Tikala. Need speak." "Well, lead the way, Your Excellency," Ira said, with the kind of sarcasm that could cut through metal. As they followed the creature down yet another glowing corridor, because this place had all the subtlety of a neon sign, Ryo whispered, "You think this Zin Argal is here to help? If not, we're back to the charming company of homicidal robots," Ira replied. "So let's hope this isn't another tourist trap." The corridor ended in a chamber that attempted to look regal but ended up resembling a junkyard's crown jewels. At the far end stood Zin Argal, an alien with an air of authority and the kind of expression that suggested it was perpetually unimpressed. "Humans," Zin Argal greeted, its voice deep and resonant, like a bass guitar with a grudge. "You survive arena." "Impressive. Yeah, we're stubborn like that," Ryo replied. "What do you want with us, Alliance?" Zin Argal said, its gaze sharp. "Tikala and humans work together. Exploit weaknesses." Ira folded her arms, skeptical. "And what's in it for you?" Zin Argal tilted its head, possibly considering how best to phrase "we won't let you die horribly" without sounding ungrateful. "Freedom. Arena flawed. System exploit possible." The implication was clear enough. They were trapped in a galactic nightmare together, and it was time to shake the status quo. As alliances went, it was less than ideal, but neither of them were in a position to be choosy. "We're in," Ryo said, "but I'm guessing communication's gonna be a laugh a minute." Zin Argal nodded, its many eyes blinking asynchronously. "Challenge, yes. Tikala have tech. Translate crude. Crude's a step up from our usual." Ira deadpanned. "What's the plan?" Zin Argal gestured to a wall which blinked into a map of the arena. "Arena controlled by Central Core. Weaponized environment. Need diversion." "Ah, the classic distraction technique," Ryo said. "You've got robots, blobs, and plants out for blood. Who's the lucky volunteer?" "You," Zin Argal replied without hesitation. Ryo sighed. "Great. Just once I'd like to be the guy who stays behind and presses the button." "Button pusher's retirement plan," Ira teased. "Let's focus on not getting killed first." Despite the grim task ahead, there was a strange comfort in having some direction. A plan, however flawed, was better than no plan at all. The Tikala, with their multifaceted eyes and complex gestures, were as alien as they came, yet here they were, plotting rebellion like old friends. "Be ready," Zin Argal instructed. "Arena watch always." "Don't worry," Ryo said. "We're used to being the universe's favorite sitcom." Back in their cell, Ryo and Ira huddled to dissect the insanity they just signed up for. "So we're the distraction," Ryo said, rubbing his temples. "Nice to be appreciated. They need chaos. We're chaotic," Ira replied with a shrug. "Let's give him a show to remember, assuming we survive long enough," Ryo added, his voice tinged with the usual gallows humor. Ira grinned, a mix of mischief and madness. "I'll start rehearsing my tap dance routine." The day of the plan arrived with all the subtlety of a charging rhino. As they stood at the entrance to the arena, surrounded by the other unwilling performers, Ryo couldn't help but feel like this was the universe's cruel joke. "So," he said to Ira, "you ready to be the distraction?" "Born ready," she replied, cracking her knuckles. "Let's make a mess." The gates creaked open, and the arena unfolded before them, a chaotic landscape of obstacles and adversaries. The crowd roared, eager for their pound of flesh. "Remember," Ryo called over the din, "chaos is our friend." With a nod, Ira dashed off, her movements calculated to draw the eye to spark interest. Ryo followed, weaving between obstacles, the adrenaline turning his limbs into a blur. The plan was simple in theory. Create enough havoc to draw the attention of the arena's watchers, giving Zin Argal and the Tikala time to infiltrate the core controls. Simple, yet incredibly stupid. "Hey, over here!" Ira shouted, waving her arms like a madwoman to draw the attention of a particularly aggressive robot. Ryo dodged a swipe from one of the sentient blobs, its gelatinous mass quivering with irritation. "You've really got away with machines," he quipped, ducking under a flailing limb. Ira winked, her movements a dance of chaos. "I aim to misbehave." The crowd's roar reached a fever pitch, the spectacle of humans chaotically challenging the arena's beasts apparently hitting the right entertainment note. Ryo could feel the eyes of countless spectators on them, like 1,000 suns of scrutiny. But beneath the spectacle, behind the chaos, lay the real purpose of their actions. Zin Argal and the Tikala were moving, invisible amidst the pandemonium, seeking the heart of the arena's control system. "Think they'll make it?" Ryo shouted as he narrowly avoided becoming the filling in a carnivorous plant sandwich. "They'd better," Ira replied, vaulting over a fallen barrier. "I'm running out of tricks." Their antics reached a crescendo, the crowd's enthusiasm a palpable force. Ryo could almost taste the moment, the heady mix of fear and excitement, of the gamble they'd thrown themselves into. Then, like a switch flipped, the arena shuddered. A ripple of confusion spread through the audience, their bloodlust turning to puzzlement as the familiar spectacle went awry. "They are in," Ryo said, a grin spreading across his face. They did it. The chaos they'd sown provided just the cover needed. The T'Kalla's cunning had found purchase, their alliance bearing fruit. The arena's defenses flickered, control slipping from the hands of their captors. Yet victory in this setting was a relative term. Their freedom was not assured, only the first step in a far longer journey. As the last echoes of disruption faded, Ryo and Ira found themselves once more the center of attention. "Well, we've certainly made an impression," Ira said, brushing dirt off her clothes. "Good," Ryo replied. "Let's make sure it's one they don't forget." With the arena's systems in disarray, the T'Kalla emerged, Zin Argal at their head. "Success," the alien leader declared. "Systems compromised. Time limited." "Music to my ears," Ryo said, the gravity of their situation still pressing down. "What's next?" "Escape," Zin Argal replied, the word like a beacon in the madness. But escape was never simple, and the universe rarely rewarded the desperate with easy paths. The arena was still a labyrinth of dangers, and their captors, though momentarily thwarted, would not stay idle for long. As they prepared to make their move, Ryo felt the weight of it all, a chance to grasp freedom from the jaws of the absurd. He shared a look with Ira, a silent understanding passing between them. "Let's go make history," she said, her voice a mix of determination and defiance. "Right behind you," Ryo replied, a grin on his face and hope in his heart. And as they moved, allies and new challenges at their side, a strange sense of possibility bloomed within them, a reminder that in the darkest corners of the universe, even the most unlikely alliances could spark a revolution. The arena was a melting pot of madness, a jamboree of cosmic chaos where the only rule was survival of the snarkiest. As Ryo and Ira maneuvered through the pandemonium, the T'Kalla, led by the ever-so-regal Zin Argal, busied themselves with the subtle art of sabotage. "Nothing like a quintessential death trap to keep the heart rate up," Ryo remarked, as they dodged yet another batch of aggressive flora with an appetite for human flesh. "Think of it as a workout," Ira shot back, her grin audible even over the racket of the arena. All the rage in sadistic fitness circles. But just when everything seemed to be going according to the half-baked plan, a ripple of uncertainty shuddered through the ranks of their alien allies. Ryo, sharp-eyed even amidst chaos, noticed a group of T'Kalla fidgeting like they'd just remembered they left the space oven on. "Something's off," he muttered, scanning the arena. "Could it be the homicidal fauna, or the fact that I didn't sign up for this circus?" Ira quipped, though there was a sharp edge to her humor now. It didn't take long for the truth to surface like a particularly unpleasant oil spill. A faction of the T'Kalla, apparently not content with the current state of galactic jeopardy, decided to mix things up with a little betrayal, as if the arena wasn't deadly enough already. The first sign was a sudden change in the already erratic behavior of the arena systems. What had been the occasional flicker of security drones turning a blind eye now became a full-on laser light show aimed at, well, them. "Ah, betrayal," Ryo sighed. "The gift that keeps on shooting. Apparently, our friends over there didn't get the memo about teamwork making the dream work," Ira added, narrowly missing a searing plasma burst. Amidst the chaos, Zin Argal's voice cut through, a guttural melody of displeasure. "Fools, faction disrupt plan. Human T'Kalla must adapt. "I thought we were just getting into the swing of things," Ryo replied, sarcasm doubling as his coping mechanism. Ira, always the pragmatist, ducked behind a makeshift barricade, her mind already whirring with backup plans. Time to improvise. "Got any bright ideas?" Ryo considered their options, which were as plentiful as a solar eclipse. "Only bright enough to not get us killed immediately." The T'Kalla, or at least the ones still on their side, regrouped with the humans. Zin Argal's many eyes flickered with what might have been the alien equivalent of an eye roll. "Sabotage faction. Need new strategy. Humans, think quickly. Great, our turn to save the day, Ira muttered. Because clearly we're the galaxy's last hope with their backs to the wall, literally in this case. They did what humans have always done best. They winged it. Ryo, never one to shy away from reckless acts of ingenuity, looked at Zin Argal. We need a comms link to those drones. Can you do that? Zin Argal hesitated, its alien brain working overtime. Possible, but complex. Complex is just a fancy word for let's not die, Ira said, as she started gathering bits of alien tech like a cosmic magpie. Let's jerry-rig a solution. In the corner of the arena that miraculously wasn't currently exploding, Ryo and Ira pieced together a device from the scraps left in the wake of their earlier chaos. A little bit of duct tape, a sprinkle of desperation, and a lot of please don't blow up. Mac Jiver would be proud, Ryo commented as they finished their makeshift transmitter. Or rolling in his grave, Ira shot back, testing the device with a grimace. But at this point, who's counting? With a hopeful flick of a switch, they managed to jury-rig a signal, hijacking the control frequency of the arena's drones. The air buzzed with tension and possibly impending doom as their impromptu tech began to work. Now, if we can just convince these mechanical nightmares that we're the good guys, Ryo mused. Or at least the less bad guys, Ira added, fingers crossed in the universal gesture of please don't let this fail. The drones hesitated, their targeting systems glitching with indecision. It was like convincing a jury of 12 sociopaths to consider community service. But slowly, awkwardly, the drones began to turn on their original programming, targeting the rogue T-Cala faction instead. See, sometimes it pays to have a few tricks up your sleeve, Ryo said, watching the tables turn with a satisfied grin. More like a whole deck, Ira replied, eyes scanning for any further surprises. But let's not pat ourselves on the back just yet. Indeed, the battle was far from over. While the traitorous T-Cala were now on the defensive, the arena itself still teemed with the usual life-threatening obstacles. And as luck would have it, the audience seemed to be growing restless, their bloodlust far from sated. We need to end this and fast, Ryo pointed out, his pragmatic side rearing its head. Before they decide we're next on the menu, agreed, Zin Argal said, its voice like gravel on glass. Arena's core still vulnerable. Humans distract, T-Cala disable. Again with the distraction, Ira said, rolling her eyes. Can't say we don't know our role. With their plan hastily rejigged, the humans once more threw themselves into the fray, this time aided by a less homicidal robotic entourage. As the drones engaged the rogue T-Cala, Ryo and Ira made their way toward the arena's heart, the control core that was their ticket to freedom, or a very messy end. Think we'll actually pull this off? Ryo asked, breathless as they navigated the chaos. Let's see, Ira replied. If we don't, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to ponder it in the afterlife. As they reached the core, a fortified hub of wires and alien tech, the stakes of their gamble became all too clear. It was a fortress of nightmares, a tangle of alien engineering so Byzantine it would make a mad scientist weep. Looks like someone's been playing hard to get, Ryo said, surveying the alien monstrosity with a critical eye. Well, we've come this far, Ira replied, crouching beside him. No point in second-guessing the plan now. With deft fingers and a healthy disregard for personal safety, they hacked, sliced, and spliced their way into the core's systems. It was a symphony of clashing metal and sparking circuits, a battle of wits and sheer bloody-mindedness against the cosmos. Just imagine, Ryo said between gritted teeth, if our science teacher could see us now. She'd probably send us to detention, Ira replied, eyes glued to the console. Or give us enough for audacity. Finally, with one last desperate tweak, the core succumbed to their assault. The arena shuddered, a groan of metal and alien discontent before falling silent. The lights dimmed, the roar of the crowd fading into a stunned, confused murmur. We did it, Ryo said, a grin breaking through the grime and exhaustion. We actually did it. Yeah, well, let's not start planning the victory parade just yet, Ira cautioned, though her relief was palpable. As they emerged from the core's depths, Zin Argal and the loyal Tikala met them with a mix of relief and newfound respect. Humans succeed. Arena disabled. Freedom possible. I'll take possible over impossible any day, Ryo said, clapping Zin Argal on what he assumed was a shoulder. With the arena's systems down, the path to escape was clear. The once imposing barriers flickered and died, leaving only the open expanse of space, hostile, unpredictable, but undeniably free. Time to make our grand exit, Ira said, as they moved with purpose, the weight of their shared victory buoying their steps. As they stepped into the unknown, leaving behind the arena that had tried its damnedest to swallow them whole, Ryo couldn't help but chuckle. You know, for a death trap, this place wasn't all bad. Sure, if you're a fan of near-death experiences, Ira shot back, that familiar fire in her eyes. But hey, at least we've got stories to tell. And so, with the galaxy stretched out before them like a vast, chaotic playground, they walked forward, ready to face whatever new challenges the universe decided to throw their way. All they had was each other, a motley crew of unlikely allies and a determination as stubborn as the stars themselves. You think we'll manage to stay out of trouble for once? Ryo asked, though he already knew the answer. Not a chance, Ira replied, laughing. But that's never stopped us before. Together, with the remnants of the Tikala following in their wake, they stepped into the next chapter of their story, a future written in the ink of defiance and camaraderie. Whatever came next, they'd face it head-on, with a smile and a sarcastic quip ready for the inevitable cosmic absurdity. Let's go make some history, Ryo said, echoing Ira's earlier sentiment. Right behind you, she replied, and as they set forth, the universe loomed large and full of potential, both terrible and wonderful. The sound of metal scraping against metal was like a lullaby to the damned, but it was hard to tune out the ever-present hum of the arena's walls. Ryo leaned back against a particularly unyielding stretch of wall, his gaze fixated on the chaos swirling around them. Just another day in paradise, he muttered, rubbing at a bruise that was rapidly darkening on his forearm. I always did love a good laser light show, but I could do without the impending doom. Ira, crouched a few feet away behind what passed for cover, shot him a look that was equal parts exasperation and wry amusement. Guess we should have read the fine print on that Galactic Zoo brochure, huh? Visit today for an unforgettable experience of mortal terror, Ryo chuckled, though the sound was more bitter than mirthful. And here I thought the worst we'd deal with would be overpriced souvenirs. At that, Ira snorted, a sharp, derisive sound that managed to cut through the madness. She shifted slightly, tapping a finger against her chin as if deep in thought. So, any bright ideas rattling around in that head of yours, or are we just winging it till we become part of the landscape? He let out a dry laugh, devoid of humor. Winging it seems to be our specialty, though I do have a few half-baked ideas. You know, the kind that might get us killed slightly less quickly. Perfect. As long as we're not dying of boredom, right? Ira deadpanned, her eyes darting to where Zin Argal was currently engaged in what looked like a heated debate with another Tikala, the alien leader's many eyes flickering with something akin to fury. Seems Zin's having a bit of a family squabble, Ryo observed, nudging a piece of debris with the toe of his boot. Think we should offer to mediate, Ira shrugged, the movement causing the alien gadgetry strapped to her arm to beep obnoxiously. Yeah, because alien politics are totally in our wheelhouse. Let's solve that right after we cure the common cold. Their banter was cut short by the sound of approaching footsteps, heavy and unmistakably unfriendly. The corridor leading from their makeshift sanctuary to the arena proper was a glowing path of certain destruction, and yet here they were, stuck like rats in a cosmic maze. Incoming, Ira murmured, her voice low but steady, as if facing down homicidal robots was just another Tuesday. Great. What's next? A marching band, Ryo quipped, though his hand instinctively tightened around the makeshift weapon at his side. a piece of scrap metal that had seen better days. The footsteps drew closer, and the source soon revealed itself. A group of rogue Tikala, their armor bristling with weaponry and intent as clear as a laser beam to the face. Ryo's mind whirred through their options, which, much like their luck, were rapidly dwindling. Zin Argal moved to intercept, its voice a guttural growl that echoed through the corridor. Rogue faction, cease hostility. Arena must stabilize. The lead rogue, a Tikala with a scar running the length of its face, emitted a laugh that was more static than sound. Stabilize. We prefer revolution. Ryo glanced at Ira, a silent exchange passing between them. This was the kind of chaos they excelled at navigating, but even their combined ingenuity might not be enough this time. "Looks like we're up," Ira said, her tone casual despite the current of tension running beneath her words. "Right, because we're just the folks to handle intergalactic mutiny," Ryo replied, rolling his eyes. He stepped forward, an action that felt both bold and incredibly stupid, but desperation had a funny way of making you do stupid things. "Hey, Scarface," he called, addressing the rogue leader. "What's the point of your little rebellion if everyone's dead?" The scarred Tikala turned slowly, regarding Ryo with a look that could strip paint. "Humans are irrelevant. Tikala destiny transcends." "Destiny, huh?" "That's what every nutjob says right before they blow something up," Ira interjected, her gaze steady and unyielding. "So why waste the effort?" There was a pause, the kind that stretched and groaned with the weight of 1,000 possible futures. For a moment, it seemed as though their words might have some effect, might even sway the rogue faction towards something resembling reason. Then, predictably, chaos erupted. The rogue Tikala opened fire, their weapons carving lines of searing light through the air. Ryo and Ira ducked, scrambling for cover as shots ricocheted off the metal walls. "Well, that worked out swell," Ryo remarked, his voice carrying a sardonic edge that cut through the din. "Just another day at the office," Ira replied, wincing as a near-miss sent sparks cascading down around them. Zin Argal, to its credit, was holding its own, its form a blur of motion and retaliation as it engaged the rogue faction. But for every enemy it took down, 2 more seemed to take their place, the numbers game a cruel and unyielding foe. "Any more half-baked ideas, or are we officially out of luck?" Ira asked, her voice tight with the strain of survival. Ryo's mind raced, a frantic dance of possibilities and impossibilities that seemed to mock him at every turn. Then, like a bolt from the blue, inspiration struck. "We've got a multitude of homicidal robots now mostly on our side, right?" Ira blinked, her expression one of incredulity. "I thought they were mostly homicidal." Details," Ryo waved off, already in motion. "Let's see if we can persuade them to join this little party." With a nod, Ira followed, her faith in Ryo's harebrained scheme seemingly as unshakable as ever. They navigated the arena's chaotic edge, slipping past the ongoing battle to where the drones hovered, indecision marring their mechanical gestures. "Okay, boys," Ryo called to the drones, his voice laced with a confidence he didn't quite feel. "Let's show these rogues what teamwork really looks like." The drones hesitated, their programming a quagmire of conflicting commands. But slowly, with an almost reluctant grace, they began to heed Ryo's plea, turning their attentions toward the rogue Tikala with the same ruthlessness they'd once directed at the humans. "Looks like we're back on the homicidal side," Ira quipped, watching as the tide of the battle began to shift once more. "Never thought I'd be happy for killer robots," Ryo replied, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow as the tide began to turn in their favor. Zin Argal, sensing the change, redoubled its efforts, its form a blur of alien strength and resolve as it fought to bring the rogue Tikala to heel. The battle raged on, a cacophony of sound and fury that seemed to stretch on into eternity. "Hope you've got an exit plan, because I'd rather not hang around for the grand finale," Ira said, her gaze never leaving the unfolding chaos. "Exit plan?" "I was just getting comfortable," Ryo shot back, though in truth, his mind was already racing ahead. spinning scenarios and contingencies like a particularly morbid game of chess. The drones, bolstered by their new programming, were proving to be a ruthless and efficient force, cutting through the rogue Tikala with surgical precision. But the battle had taken its toll, leaving a grim tableau of destruction in its wake. As the last of the rogues fell, Ryo and Ira surveyed the aftermath, a bleak landscape of trashed tech and broken bodies. It was a victory of sorts, but one that came at a price that was all too familiar. "Well, that's one more chapter for the memoirs," Ryo said, his voice heavy with the weight of experience. Ira merely nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Let's just hope there's a happy ending." Zin Argal, battered but unbowed, joined them, its alien form casting a long shadow in the dim light. "Humans fight well, faction neutralized, arena stabilized." "Well, we do what we can," Ryo replied, though the words felt hollow in the face of their losses. The corridor, once a path to oblivion, now seemed to beckon with the promise of escape. The prospect of freedom was tantalizingly close, yet the journey had left its mark, etching scars into both flesh and spirit. "Ready to leave this death trap behind?" Ira asked, though the question felt more like a shared understanding, a silent pact between survivors. Ryo nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Let's blow this popsicle stand." With the remnants of the Tikala in tow, they made their way toward the exit, the promise of the galaxy beyond offering a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But as they stepped into the light, the weight of their journey pressed down, a constant reminder of the price of survival. "Think there's a universe out there that doesn't want us dead?" Ryo mused, though he already knew the answer. "Probably not," Ira replied, her voice a bomb in the darkness. "But I wouldn't have it any other way." Together they moved forward, ready to face whatever cosmic absurdities the universe had in store, their path lit by the shared resolve that bound them against the chaos. Whatever awaited them, they would meet it head-on, armed with stubborn defiance and a smirk for the inevitable. Ryo leaned against the wall, surveying the mess they'd just created. "Well, that was a delightful distraction," he muttered, wiping soot off his face with the back of his hand. "Anyone else feel like they just went through a blender set to extra chunky?" Ira chuckled, though the sound was more of a wheeze. "You call that a blender?" "I've had hangovers that were smoother." She fidgeted with the alien gadget on her arm, hoping to coax it into doing something useful and not just beep annoyingly whenever it felt like it. Ryo squinted at the dim light spilling into the corridor. "So, any bright ideas on how to get out of this galactic death trap?" He looked at Ira, who was pacing, her mind visibly working overtime. "Funny you should ask," Ira said, stopping suddenly. "Remember how we said the arena's systems are about as stable as a drunk at a wedding?" "And just as prone to disastrous speeches," Ryo replied, scratching his head. "Well, I've noticed something. The energy fluctuations, there's a pattern. A glitch in the system, maybe. It's irregular, but if we time it right." Ira trailed off, tapping a rhythm on her thigh. "You're saying we can ride a malfunction out of here?" Ryo's eyebrows lifted with a mix of disbelief and admiration. "Damn, Ira, but you are a genius when it comes to turning calamity into opportunity. Flattery's nice, but let's focus on not getting fried, eh?" Ira shot back, though her lips twitched into a small smile. Zin Argal, seemingly recovering from the battle's chaos, hovered nearby. "Humans find pattern in chaos," Ryo laughed. "Oh, we excel at that. It's practically a species-wide pastime, much like complaining." Ira nodded. "Right, so while the arena's systems are busy having an existential crisis, we slip through the cracks, but timing will be everything." "Sounds like fun," Ryo said, sarcasm dripping from his words. "We've only got one shot at this." "So what's the plan?" Ira gestured to the corridor. "The energy fluctuations happen every 15 minutes. We need to time our move with the next cycle. Get through the force field during the dip." "Perfect. Nothing like playing hopscotch with death," Ryo quipped, already preparing himself for the next bout of insanity. Zin Argal's eyes blinked in sequence, a bizarre sight they were all getting uncomfortably used to. "Tikala allies will assist. Arena will not hold prisoners." Good to know we've got the home team advantage for once, Ira said, rolling her eyes. But first, we need to gather the scraps of whatever tech we can use. We'll need everything. Ryo raised his makeshift weapon, a bent piece of debris that looked more like a crumpled metal noodle than a sword. This is about as useful as a chocolate teapot right now. Let me see that, Ira said, grabbing the piece of metal. She fiddled with it, using the alien gadget to emit a low-frequency pulse that seemed to strengthen the metal's integrity. There, should hold even if it's not exactly cutting-edge tech. Nothing like a DIY approach, Ryo remarked, weighing the metal in his hand. Feels like I'm about to joust in a medieval fair. Your turn's in. The alien leader tilted its head, considering. T-Cala weapons are not for humans, but assistance is given. Protection will be allocated. Does anyone else find it ironic that we're relying on the same systems that tried to kill us to save us? Ira asked, scratching her head as she scanned the arena's battered tech. It's poetic in a twisted way, Ryo said, shrugging. Not like we have better options. With their plans semi-solidified, they spent the next few minutes scavenging the debris for anything useful. The arena, once a place of certain doom, now felt like a treasure hunt with dire consequences. Find the right piece of tech or die trying. The moments ticked by with agonizing slowness, the tension building like a balloon ready to pop. Each glance at the corridor seemed to promise their doom, yet also their salvation. Ira glanced at her contraption, the beeping a reminder of the ticking clock. All right, everyone ready. As ready as a man can be when his life depends on a misfiring alien AC unit, Ryo replied, holding his makeshift weapon like it was Excalibur. Zin Argal and the remaining T-Cala warriors took position, their forms looming in the flickering light. They were allies for now. Whatever happened next would determine if this fragile alliance would hold. Here goes nothing, Ira said, her voice steady, though the gravity of the moment was not lost on any of them. The countdown began, each second an eternity. Ryo found himself oddly calm, the absurdity of their situation a familiar companion. He glanced at Ira, who met his eyes with a nod. On cue, the energy fluctuations dipped, the force field flickering like a failing bulb. Ira was the first to move, her reflexes sharp as she slipped through the barrier with a fluid grace that belied the chaos around them. Go, 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 Ryo shouted, following close behind, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. They all poured into the corridor, the world a blur of motion and fear. The force field crackled ominously, threatening to snap back at any moment. Zin Argal followed, its many limbs moving with a speed that was both unsettling and awe-inspiring. Behind, the remaining T-Cala brought up the rear, ensuring no one was left behind. They sprinted down the corridor, each step resonating with the desperate hope of escape. The arena's systems groaned and hummed, technology both enemy and ally as they raced toward whatever lay beyond. As they reached the exit, the force field flared to life once more, sealing the arena behind them with a sound like thunder. The corridor stretched ahead, a gauntlet still fraught with unknown dangers. Didn't think we'd get this far, Ryo admitted, breathing heavily as he glanced back at Ira. Never underestimate the power of a well-timed glitch, Ira replied, though her eyes were already scanning for the next hurdle. Zin Argal joined them, its form imposing even in the cramped space. Humans are resourceful. Arena is compromised. Resourceful is one way to put it, Ryo said, a smirk playing on his lips. I'd call it sheer bloody-mindedness. Their path led them deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, the way forward dim and uncertain. Yet for all the unknowns, there was a spark of hope, a chance that they might actually pull this off. Let's not kid ourselves, Ira said, her tone pragmatic as ever. We're trading one problem for another, but at least this one's new. They pressed on, the weight of their choices lingering like a specter at their shoulders. The corridors twisted and turned, a maddening maze with no clear end in sight. Despite everything, Ryo felt a strange sense of camaraderie, an unspoken bond forged in the hellfire of shared adversity. They were a motley crew, a band held together by little more than circumstance and necessity. "Think we'll get a parade when we get out of this?" Ryo asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "If by parade you mean chased by whatever's next on the universe's hit list, then sure," Ira replied, her laughter a brief, welcome reprieve from the tension. As they navigated the corridors, they stumbled across a control panel, its surface flickering with alien symbols. Ira studied it, her fingers tracing patterns as if deciphering an ancient script. "Think this is the way out?" Ryo asked, peering over her shoulder. "Either that or it's the self-destruct button. 50-50 chance, really," she joked, though the focus in her eyes was deadly serious. Ryo chuckled. Nothing ventured, nothing blown to smithereens. With a deep breath, Ira made her choice, pressing a sequence of symbols that lit up with a soft glow. The corridor shuddered, walls parting to reveal a path that led, hopefully, to freedom. "Okay, team, let's see if we can finally get off this ride," Ira said, her voice tinged with a mixture of hope and disbelief. They pushed onward, the new path promising a way out of the nightmare. Every step was a gamble, but they'd long since run out of better options. The exit loomed ahead, a beacon of potential salvation. It was tantalizingly close, yet the weight of their ordeal hung heavy in the air. Would they finally make it out? "Last one out's a rotten egg," Ryo quipped, though his heart was a tumult of emotions as they neared the threshold. Zin Argal and the Tikala flanked them, their presence a reminder of the strange alliances formed in the heat of battle. Together, they crossed the threshold, emerging into a space that was both alien and familiar. Before them lay the vast expanse of the galaxy, a universe of possibilities and perils stretching out to infinity. The arena was behind them now, a chapter closed, but the story far from over. "Think we'll find a nice, quiet planet to retire on?" Ira asked, her voice laced with the same dark humor that had carried them this far. "With our luck, it'll probably be inhabited by carnivorous bunnies," Ryo replied, grinning despite everything. Together they faced the unknown, ready to take on whatever the cosmos threw their way. Their journey was far from over, but they'd made it this far, and that was something. The stars awaited, and with them, a future that was as uncertain as it was promising. For now, they'd take it one step at a time, armed with nothing more than wit, determination, and the unbreakable bond of survivors. "Here's to the next adventure," Ryo said, feeling a strange sense of peace in the chaos. "May it be slightly less suicidal than the last," Ira added, her eyes on the endless horizon. They stepped forward into the unknown, their path lit by the shared resolve that had seen them through the darkest of times. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, with a smile and a healthy dose of sarcasm. The Galactic Zoo, which had once felt like a cross between an intergalactic death trap and a discount theme park ride, was now a playground for chaos. A dysfunctional playground, mind you. The kind that probably got condemned by health inspectors, but somehow was still operational because A. Regulations were for the weak. Ryo stood next to Ira, his eyes darting over the debris-strewn arena now teetering on the brink of total collapse. Their colleagues, if you could call them that, were a mix of Tikala warriors and the occasional human, all stumbling around like extras in a low-budget disaster movie. "So," Ryo said, leaning against a pillar that looked ready to quit its job as structural support, "our brilliant plan to annoy the arena systems until they self-destruct is going swimmingly, wouldn't you say?" Ira smirked, her fingers deftly manipulating the alien gadget strapped to her arm, the beeping now a symphony of impending doom. Who knew pressing random buttons could be so effective? "I should have tried it more often back in engineering school." "Well, at least no one can accuse us of not being hands-on," Ryo replied, watching as yet another section of the arena lit up with sparks and alarming flashes of light. "This place is about to become one hell of an insurance claim." Zin Argal, watching the spectacle with an expression that might have been awe or indigestion, approached them. "Humans possess unique talent for destruction," Ryo shrugged. "We aim to please, And by please, I mean barely survive while everything explodes around us. The arena's systems, already teetering on the brink thanks to Ira's creative sabotage, began to malfunction in increasingly spectacular ways. Force fields flickered in and out of existence. The homicidal robots short-circuited and did the mechanical equivalent of a drunken dance, and the carnivorous flora started screaming, a sound like a malfunctioning blender on an existential crisis. Ira gave a small, satisfied nod. Just another day at the office, eh? Glancing around, Ryo couldn't help but feel a weird sense of pride mixed with the usual dose of impending dread. You know, I always wanted to leave a lasting impact on the universe. Just didn't think it'd be this literal. Think of it as a legacy, Ira replied, her eyes scanning the chaos. Or a very elaborate resignation letter. Their moment of gallows humor was interrupted by a blaring alarm. The arena, now aware of its own imminent demise, was desperately trying to rally its systems for one last attempt to contain the prisoners. It was like watching someone try to put out a kitchen fire with a bottle of cooking oil. The ground beneath them rumbled ominously, a subtle reminder that their time was very much limited. Ryo and Ira exchanged a look, one part determination, two parts let's not die today. All right, folks, Ryo called out to their ragtag group, time to vacate before this place goes full supernova. Zin Argal's many limbs gestured in the direction of the exit, the alien's version of a nod. Tikala warriors will assist. This way. Ira took a steadying breath, her hand brushing against the holographic device she'd managed to salvage earlier. Let's just hope the universe is feeling generous today. They moved with purpose, a collective sprint toward what they hoped was freedom. Each step was a calculated gamble, the floor beneath them offering the kind of stability that would give a safety inspector a coronary. In retrospect, I think we could have planned this better, Ryo shouted over the din of malfunctioning machinery and wailing robotic voices. Maybe with a flowchart or something. Or a fire extinguisher, Ira added, sidestepping a sparking console that sent a shower of sparks into the air like a very pissed-off fireworks display. As they reached the corridor leading out of the arena, a section of the ceiling decided it had had enough and collapsed in a spectacular display of gravity and poor architectural design. Ryo barely managed to pull Ira out of harm's way. Thanks, Ira said, brushing dust from her clothes. Boy, that ceiling really had it out for me. I think it was just a fan of dramatic exits, Ryo replied, offering a crooked grin. The corridor stretched ahead, a dimly lit tunnel that promised both salvation and another potential death trap. Unsurprisingly, hope and despair were often seen holding hands in their line of work. Not to jinx it, Ryo said, already feeling the irony gods sharpening their pens, but this might actually work. Ira shot him a skeptical glance. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's still a galaxy of ways for this to go wrong. Sure enough, the corridor was littered with obstacles, the remnants of alien technology and design choices that ranged from innovative to what were they thinking. The walls hummed with residual energy, an ambient reminder of the zoo's previous attempts to shepherd its unwilling participants. As they pressed on, Ira's gadget emitted a series of beeps, each one signaling another crucial step in their escape plan. All right, this should be the control hub. We disable this, and we should be able to slip out undetected. Ryo glanced at the console, its surface a kaleidoscope of alien symbols that would probably give a linguist nightmares. So, any chance you actually know what you're doing, or is this more of a wing it and hope for the best scenario? Ira tapped a series of commands with the kind of confidence that came from a complete disregard for potential consequences. A little of column A, a little of column B. The console responded with a series of chirps and bleeps, each one a puzzle piece in their escape. Ryo watched as Ira's face lit up with something that might have been victory or another impending disaster. It was hard to tell sometimes. We're in, she declared, the console now responding to her commands. Just need to disrupt the security matrix and we should have a clear path. Ryo raised an eyebrow. And by disrupt, you mean? Make it crash and burn, Ira said with a smirk that could have made a dragon feel inadequate. He chuckled. You really missed your calling in IT. With a flourish, Ira activated the final sequence, sending a ripple through the zoo systems. The corridor lights flickered, the alarms ceased their wailing, and somewhere, deep within the bowels of the arena, something very important broke in a very permanent way. There, Ira said, stepping back with a self-satisfied grin. That should keep them busy. Ryo looked around, half expecting something to explode just to spite them. I don't want to jinx it, but I think we might actually make it. The group resumed their march, now unimpeded by the arena's once omnipresent defenses. Ryo couldn't help but feel a swell of triumph, tempered only by the grim knowledge that their journey was far from over. As they neared what they hoped was the exit, the corridor widened into a chamber that appeared to be the gateway to freedom, or another cleverly disguised death room. The universe was nothing if not consistent. Last stop, Ira announced, her voice tinged with equal parts relief and apprehension. Zin Argal, ever the enigmatic observer, gestured toward the looming portal. Humans exceed expectations. Arena is liberated. Ryo grinned, a rare moment of genuine camaraderie crossing his features. Well, we do our best work when we're not being actively dismembered. Their ragtag group stepped through the portal, emerging into a vast expanse that stretched beyond their wildest hopes. It was a galaxy, an uncharted realm of stars and possibilities that promised both peril and potential. Ira looked around, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. We actually did it. Ryo nodded, feeling the weight of their journey lift if only slightly. For now, anyway. The universe has a funny way of throwing curveballs. They stood there, a motley crew of survivors, each one scarred by the trials they'd faced, and yet somehow stronger for it. Despite the odds, they'd carved a path through chaos and emerged on the other side, not unscathed but unbroken. The stars beckoned, a promise of new adventures and the inevitable challenges that would accompany them. Ryo and Ira shared a glance, an unspoken agreement that whatever came next, they would face it together. Here's to the next chapter, Ira said, her voice carrying a note of determination that belied the exhaustion in her eyes. Yeah, Ryo replied, a grin tugging at his lips despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. May it involve fewer homicidal robots and more quiet beaches. With a final nod to Zin Argal and their alien allies, they turned to face the universe beyond, stepping boldly into the unknown with only their wits, their resolve, and a healthy dose of sarcasm to guide them. The galaxy awaited, and whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them with the same irreverence and tenacity that had seen them through the darkest of times. Together, they took their first steps into a future that was as unpredictable as it was promising, ready to conquer whatever challenges and absurdities the universe had in store. The universe, as it turned out, didn't give a flying asteroid about plans, well laid or otherwise. As Ryo and Ira stood on the precipice of freedom, taking in the sprawling galaxy beyond, reality hit them like a rogue satellite. They were free, sure, but in a galaxy that felt about as welcoming as a snake pit with a no-shoes policy. Well, Ryo began, hands on hips, surveying the expanse of space that stretched out before them like a black abyss. We're free. Kind of. In a lost-in-space sort of way. Ira gave a short bark of laughter. Yeah, free like a fish in a desert. But hey, at least we're not in that arena anymore. I'm tired of being a gladiator. No more homicidal robots, screaming plants, or sentient blobs, Ryo agreed, casting a glance at their ragtag group, now a motley crew of humans and Tikala warriors. Just a universe full of other things trying to kill us. Zin Argal, the Tikala leader, stepped up beside them, his alien eyes reflecting the distant stars like twin moons. Challenge is life, he said, his voice a low rumble. Freedom is different. Different's one way to put it, Ira said, fiddling with her salvaged gadget like it was a stress ball. I've got a list of other words, but most of them aren't fit for polite company. Good thing we're not polite company, Ryo chimed in, flashing a grin that was more teeth than warmth. Their group, a bizarre blend of species and temperaments, seemed to share a collective breath. It wasn't relief, more like the moment before you jump off a cliff, hoping there's water below and not a bed of rocks. "So, what's the plan, fearless leader?" Ira asked, nudging Ryo with an elbow. "We going to dismantle the rest of these arenas, or did you have a different suicidal mission in mind?" Ryo scratched his chin, feeling the stubble that had gathered there like it was squatting on his face. "I dunno. Dismantling the rest of these arenas sounds like a good way to keep busy. And alive." "Mostly." Zin Argal gestured with one of his many limbs, a peculiar blend of elegance and menace. "Tikala allies will aid. Arena oppression must end." "Look at that," Ryo said, clapping Zin on the back gently, because who knew what those spines did. "We've got ourselves a revolution. All it took was nearly getting smushed by a homicidal ceiling." Ira snorted. "Not the first time ceilings have betrayed us." Together, they began piecing together the framework of a plan. It was a patchwork of half-baked ideas, wild guesses, and a generous helping of let's not die today mentality. Perfectly sane, if you squinted and ignored the parts that screamed bad idea in neon lights. Their first task, they decided, was to locate the coordinates of other arenas. The galaxy was littered with them, like hazardous breadcrumbs leading straight to hell. The arena's flickering systems, courtesy of Ira's sabotage, still offered snippets of intel, like an old spy whispering secrets between wheezes. "You know," Ira mused, tapping away at a holographic screen that sputtered more than a broken neon sign, "we're doing the universe a favor. Freeing up the real estate market. Property values on murder arenas must be sky high," Ryo replied. "Everyone wants that rustic blood and guts aesthetic." The Tikala warriors, while not privy to every cultural nuance, seemed to appreciate the humor, or at least tolerated it. Zin Argal, who had watched the repartee with the patience of a saint or someone on heavy sedatives, offered his own take. "Many Tikala were lost to arenas. Revenge is long overdue." Ryo nodded, solemn for a moment. "Well, consider us your demolition crew, just with less finesse and more boom." As they plotted, the galaxy beyond seemed to pulse with possibility and peril. Stars blinked in the void, each one a potential home, a new challenge, or another arena waiting to be toppled. It was daunting, sure, but it also felt like a gamble with decent odds. "Any chance we can find a planet with breathable air and, I dunno, a bar?" Ira asked, her tone light but her eyes hopeful. Ryo chuckled. "A bar's a given. I think we've earned a drink or 12. Their makeshift coalition, now united under the banner of we'd rather not die in an arena, set their sights on the nearest hub of civilization." The plan was simple. Gather resources, find intel, avoid getting shot, and then move on to dismantle more of the galaxy's gladiatorial nightmares. "Think we'll run into any friendly faces?" Ira asked as they prepped their ship, an ungainly but functional vessel that had seen better days, a bit like the crew itself. "Friendly? Probably not," Ryo said, testing the engines with a kick. "But I'm hoping for at least not actively trying to kill us." Zin Argal, already at the helm, tapped a series of commands that brought the ship systems online with a groan that echoed through the hull. "Fate is uncertain, but with allies, future is less bleak." "The future's always less bleak with friends," Ryo quipped, strapping in. "Even if said friends are prone to sarcasm and breaking things." Their ship shuddered as it broke free of the planet's orbit, a small cacophony of metal and overworked engines. As they soared into the vastness of space, each member of their crew, human and Tikala alike, felt the weight of their mission. "All right, team," Ira said over the comms, her voice a rallying cry in the silence of space. "Next stop, who knows? But wherever it is, let's make sure they remember our names." "Or our explosions," Ryo added. "Either works." The stars stretched out before them, a map with no clear path, and yet they felt the pull of destiny, or maybe that was just the ship's questionable navigation system. Regardless, they were moving forward, one malfunctioning starship at a time. As they traveled, conversations drifted to what lay ahead, what they hoped to achieve, what nightmares they might face, and the eternal question of where the nearest decent cup of coffee could be found in a galaxy that seemed to thrive on chaos. "Still can't believe we're doing this," Ira muttered, half to herself. "Hey, would you rather be back in that arena?" Ryo asked, arching an eyebrow. "Point taken," she conceded. "But next time, let's try a plan that doesn't involve nearly getting killed." "Where's the fun in that?" Ryo replied, grinning despite the weight of their task. Their journey was fraught with the usual dangers of space travel: sporadic asteroid fields, occasional pirate raids, and the ever-present threat of cabin fever. But somehow, through a mix of stubbornness and sheer dumb luck, they managed to avoid the worst of it. Their first stop was a station orbiting a gas giant, a rust bucket of commerce and crime that promised both opportunity and trouble, often in the same breath. The moment they docked, the air was filled with the familiar scent of oil, ozone, and the questionable hygiene of its denizens. "Smells like home," Ryo said, taking a deep breath as they entered the station's bustling marketplace. "If your home's a greasy spoon in the wrong part of town." Ira wrinkled her nose but soldiered on. "Let's find what we need and get out before someone decides we'd make good target practice." The market was a chaotic symphony of hawkers, traders, and the occasional pickpocket with sticky fingers and a penchant for fast exits. As Ryo and Ira navigated the throng, Zin Argal and the Tikala kept a watchful eye, their presence alone enough to deter most troublemakers. "Over there," Ryo pointed, nodding towards a vendor whose wares were stacked in precarious piles of questionable legality. "Looks like he might have something useful." Approaching the vendor, they engaged in that timeless ritual of haggling, a dance as ancient as trade itself, with the added bonus of language barriers and faulty translators. "I give good price," the vendor said, smiling with teeth that resembled a picket fence after a tornado. Ira rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "Define good, because I'm defining it as not getting scammed today." Their negotiations were an exercise in patience, punctuated by the vendor's attempts at charm, which landed with all the grace of a lead balloon. In the end, they secured a battered but functional data pad containing the coordinates of several arenas, an invaluable asset for their crusade. "One step closer," Ryo said, pocketing the device. "Let's hope the next stop has less haggling and more answers." With their business concluded, they returned to the ship, the marketplace a fading memory as they prepared for the next leg of their journey. As they left the station's orbit, the galaxy stretched out before them once more, a vast playground of stars and shadows. "Feels good to be on the move again," Ira said, settling into her seat. Ryo nodded. "Keep moving, keep surviving. It's what we do best." Their mission was clear: dismantle the arenas, free those trapped within, and bring a measure of chaos to the order that had long oppressed them. It was a task that would demand everything they had, and then some. But as they pressed onward, the weight of their purpose did not diminish their spirits. If anything, it strengthened the bonds between them, each challenge met with a shared resolve and the kind of dark humor that only survivors could muster. "Think we'll ever settle down?" Ira asked, half joking, half hopeful. Ryo shrugged. "Maybe. But until then, there's a galaxy out there that needs a good shaking up." Together, they faced the stars, ready to tackle whatever lay ahead with the same irreverence that had carried them this far. The galaxy awaited, a theater of possibilities and dangers that promised to test their mettle time and again. And as they traveled, they knew one thing for certain: wherever their journey led, they would face it together, with snark in their hearts and a universe of trouble at their fingertips. The stars beckoned, and they answered, a band of misfits united by circumstance, bound for adventure, and determined to leave their mark on a galaxy that had dared to underestimate them.